this is Dave.
I'm Barbara.
From Hiking with Dave and Barbara. You can catch our blog on www.hikingwithdave-and-barbara. Today we're going to do something new. We're going to do a set of videos on which we're going to title Can You Do It? Today we're going to cover the Everest Base Camp trek that we did in 2016. I'm just going to give you a bit of a background on this and why we did it quickly. Going back to 2015, we were walking the Camino in Spain and we were on the high plains, the Meseta. It was early morning, about 9 o'clock. We were having a coffee after we'd already walked for 4 or 5 miles. This chap comes in, a Kiwi, a big Kiwi, called Barry. And he starts to talk about all the things he's done over the last few years. He'd done the Kilimanjaro, he'd done Mount Kinabalu, and he'd also done Everest Base Camp. And at that point, I'm thinking, yeah, we could do this, couldn't we?
If Barry can.
If Barry can, we can. Anyway, back to England, back to the UK, about October, early November 2015. And we started to ask questions about how we can do it. We did some investigation and research. So what we're trying to do today is just answer some of those questions that we asked back in 2015. We eventually did it in February 2016. So we asked a lot of questions quite quickly. So this should give you an idea whether you can do it too. What we're going to do is going to break it down into 5 sections. First, the cost. Can you afford it? Second, the timescales. Have you got the time to do it? Number 3, how hard is it? This definitely isn't everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody can do it, however hard you try. Number 4, we're going to look at the services, including the hotels, accommodation and food. And finally, we're going to look at a quick section about hike-specific issues. There's a couple of issues just specific to this hike really, and Barbara's going to deal with those a bit later. So let's have a look at number 1, the cost. Right, let's have a look at section 1, the costs. First of all, we're assuming that you're not going to try and do this independently. When we did the trek, we probably saw 1 or 2 people doing the trek independently. Isn't really feasible. It's possible, but it's not really feasible. Virtually everybody, to a man, was doing it with some sort of company. So the company we booked was a Nepalese company called Himalayan Wonders, and everything worked absolutely perfectly. We paid 10% up front, and then we paid the remainder 2 days before the trek in Kathmandu. I think it was in cash, if I remember. Total cost $1,400 US. And in a minute, Barbara will tell you what that includes roughly. As an example of a standard package company or choice company in the UK, I picked Exodus just as an example. They're charging $2,115 US. Now, if you look at the differences there, they're probably charging 50% more than booking with a local company in Nepal like we did. The advantages with Exodus probably are it's APTA bonded, so your money's protected. So if the company or something happens in Nepal, you're going to get your money back. So you just take a view on that. Flights, most of the packages start from Kathmandu. Flights are separate. Flights from the UK to Kathmandu might cost you $500. I've just done a bit of research. Maybe £500 return, London, Kathmandu return. New York, a bit more expensive. We've got it down as $850 US return to Kathmandu from JFK. The actual package includes most things, but I was just going to run through those quickly.
What I liked about it was they looked after you from the minute you arrived at Kathmandu, picked you up, hotel in Kathmandu, flight from Kathmandu to Lukla airport, 12 nights, tea houses, all the food, all the Sherpas, the guides, flight back to Kathmandu, hotel again in Kathmandu, and then finally lift back to the airport. You don't actually need to do anything yourself at all. Also, in advance, they'd phoned us up on various occasions online. They've got a full kit list and so much information about what you need for the trek. And even they would take you shopping around Kathmandu just in case you didn't have any of the right kit with you when you got there. So a fantastic company to book with.
It was, and they sorted out all the licenses as well. Licenses,
yes.
or is that what you call them? Licenses as well. So there was nothing paid when you got there. In fact, the only thing you needed to pay for was water, effectively. Water, which does cost you a bit as you get higher up the mountain. In terms of clothing, you can either buy your special equipment in the UK or the US or Europe. You might spend £500 or £600 how long is a piece of string for this. If you do want a cheaper version, you can buy stuff in Kathmandu before you do the trip. A couple of lads on the trip we did bought the stuff, all probably fake, but it seemed to do them perfectly well. Anyway, please allow some costs in there. But if you can afford it, you can do this trek at this minute. So we're going to move on next to the timescales. Move on to section 2, the timescales. When you can actually do the trek. The best times, or really the only times, are between September, October, November, and Feb, March and April. Those 2 sets of 3 months. We did ours in February. How long is the trip itself? Well, it's a 12-day trip normally. You look at most companies, they're offering 12 days, and that is 9 days actual hiking, a couple of days acclimatization to the altitude as well. You arrive back usually on the 12th day. Now, there can be some issues with flights, local flights. You have to take a local flight, and that flight does get held up with bad weather. So you need to add a day either side to make sure you get back to New York or London. We're thinking probably 17 days is a good time. Give yourself a couple of days acclimatization at the beginning, and not acclimatization, jet lag, getting over jet lag, and at the end give yourself a few days just to make sure you get back to Kathmandu to catch your original flight. So if you've got that amount of time, you can still do this trip.
Also, if you have
a
couple of spare days in Kathmandu, there is an awful lot to go and see. It's a very, very interesting city, and there's like older areas to go and visit as well. Unfortunately, they did suffer from some earthquake damage a few years ago, and then the local people are so friendly. It's also very, very cheap.
It is. It is a great place. It's a fantastic place. Okay, we're going to move on to the next section. Okay, we're going to move on to section 3, and probably one of the most important for some people. How hard is the trek? Okay, we're going to look at the distances to start with. It's only 65 kilometres each way. So you're talking about 40 miles each way, which might sound a lot, but actually in trekking terms isn't particularly far. If we look at the ascent, the actual ascent you're doing, you're not going from sea level to the top of Everest or Everest Base Camp. You're going from Lukla Airport to Everest Base Camp, which works out at 2,400 metres over 6 days of actual hiking, which works out 400 metres per day. That is not a great height increase each day on average. If you're used to walking up Snowdon, or you're quite a good hiker, then really the altitude should not be an issue. You've obviously got to do this for 6 days, so basically you've got to be quite a good walker, but actually the terrain isn't particularly difficult. It's not a really hard hike in my opinion. You generally walking 5 to 8 hours per day, but you'll always stop for lunch and you'll always stop for a snack, and it is not too hard. So just to conclude, the heights and distances are not big. The other advantage, of course, is compared to other treks, is your bags are being carried all the way. You never have to carry a bag. So to somebody who maybe isn't the strongest hiker, who's not used to carrying bags, this is actually quite a good hike to do. Yeah, anything to add on that one, Barbara? Have I covered most things on that?
No, you just carried a day sack.
A day sack.
With your few things in it, and that was it.
So as long as you can manage that sort of hiking for 6 days going up, then this trek is still for you. Okay, I'm going to stop there. We're going to move on to the next section. Okay, so now we're going to come on to another thing that can stop a few people. We're going to look at the services, mainly the accommodation and food, which won't please everybody. So let's look at the actual accommodation. Usually on the way up and down, you're staying in a private room in a tea house. I can't quite describe a tea house, a simple hotel, I'd say. The rooms are not en suite, usually twin rooms, but you do get a private room. But this is not 5-star. This is very basic accommodation. If you're used to a travel lodge or used to somewhere in Singapore, this is a totally different ball game. Usually 1 or 2 toilets per tea house, I would say. And they're not great. In fact, some are terrible. So if you don't like squat toilets, if you don't like frozen toilets, this trek is not for you. There's no point in going on this trek expecting great accommodation, luxury. This is raw trekking as it goes. Anything to add on that one, Barbara?
Just to say, when we were there, beginning of the February season, we had no showers for a week because there was no running water. The pipes were frozen. Take lots of hand sanitizer with you, and everybody just kept their clothes on.
Yeah, it
Or
was.
their hats.
Yeah,
It was very, very cold when we went.
yeah. So it's a big deal to some people. I would say it's not the most the clean. It's not Singapore. I can't say it's not Singapore. It's not the cleanest place in the world. Nepal itself is a very poor country. It's it's not the most hygienic. If you've got issues with hygiene, I'd forget it straight away and do something else. Anyway, okay, that's the accommodation. Now let's look at the food. Well, the food was actually pretty good in my opinion. Pancakes for breakfast, cups of tea, cups of coffee, well, sort of.
No milk.
No milk. You could buy a beer or whatever, but food-wise, it was mostly rice dishes, noodle dishes, I would say. You could have chicken, vegetable. So as a vegetarian, you probably could get away with this trek, I think. You need to check, but I think you could probably get away with it. If you're talking vegan, if you're talking you've got allergies, I'm not sure that would be doable. But you probably need to check that in more detail. Anything to add on the food, Barbara?
Yeah, we tended to order, when we arrived at the tea house in the afternoon, we tended to be able to order. There was a choice of a couple of dishes for tea.
Yeah.
So, so you could order it.
Plenty of food. I don't think we ever went short on food, that's for sure.
No.
The other issue, of course, is water. The water is the only thing which isn't provided on the trek, really. So you end up buying water, bottled water, pretty well all the way up the trek. At the bottom of in Kathmandu, for instance, a bottle of water costs you, 20 cents or something like that. And as you go higher and higher, it gets more and more expensive until you reach the very top, and you can't really drink the water because the water is polluted from the glacier, etc. I don't know, it was £2 or £3 a litre or something like that. It was not cheap. But that is really the only thing you've got to pay for. Right, let's move on to the next section. We're going to move on to the last section, which is hike-specific issues. There's a couple here which I've written down, which Barbara's probably going to talk about. Firstly is the trekking group problem, which I know concerned Barbara a great deal, and also the altitude, something which is difficult to say you can or you can't do it, you will or you won't get it. Barbara, do you want to talk about the trekking group problems?
Well, I was concerned, and before we actually got there, I was concerned because you're spending like 24/7 for 9 days with the same group of people. So I was slightly concerned as to whom there would be. And also, we also could check online to see if anybody else had actually booked our trip, because we did want to check with other people. We were the luckiest people ever. We met the 4 nicest, happiest, friendliest young people we've come across. They were so lovely and kept us amused all the way. They made all the difference to the trek, especially for myself, with encouragement and food arriving and sharing snacks, and they were so lovely.
So what I would say is check with the company before you book that date to see if anybody else has already booked on it. Something with the company we used, Himalayan Wonders. I think it was 10 was the maximum per trip, and I know when we booked there was already 4 people on it, so we knew there was 4 people. We did meet a couple of people who were just with, one person, and they were just with a single guide. So it was 1 person and a guide. And I had the feeling that this lady was not particularly enjoying it. I could be wrong, but I think she'd have much rather been with us 6 happy people. So make sure there's other people on there. You don't know what you're going to get in terms of what the people are like. Our people were great. But definitely, if there's a few people there, the more the merrier, I would say. Altitude. It's something that I can't say to you, you're slightly overweight, you're going to get altitude sickness or whatever. Nobody knows who it's really going to affect. out of the 6 of us, 3 of us, not me, but Barbara, and 2 of the other guys had altitude sickness to some degree. Not particularly pleasant, but it didn't stop you doing it. But saying that, you speak to the guides, and they virtually all had to helicopter somebody off the mountain at some point. I was quite surprised how they all said, oh yeah, last year we had to helicopter somebody off. Oh yeah, we had to helicopter somebody off 2 years ago. Anything to add on this? Wasn't a great deal you could do about it.
Well, yeah, you need to be fit as well.
You do need to be fit.
Being fit does help.
Yeah.
You could have taken altitude tablets.
Yeah.
See your doctor, see what your doctor might recommend.
Yeah.
That's it really.
Yeah, I think so. So just be wary. I could say you could do it and you might get altitude sickness and it might be very difficult. You are quite high.
Sorry, the final thing, we did check our travel insurance before we went. We've got an annual policy because we go on a few holidays a year, and I did phone them up to make sure that if you were ill, they can helicopter you from base camp back to Kathmandu. Ours would have done.
Yeah. So we aren't health experts. So obviously, if you've got a concern about your actual health, can you actually do the trek? Go and see a doctor, of course. But if you've got the money and you've got the time and you don't mind the accommodation, and which is an issue for some people, then it's a fantastic trek. It really is probably one of the best things we've ever done.
I would definitely agree.
Yeah.
Scenery, everything about it, absolutely stunning. And to think you're one of the few people who've been to base camp.
Yeah.
And when we got there was only 20 people there because it was before the main mountaineering season.
Yeah. Another good reason to go a bit earlier, but it was quite amazing, and that about sums it up. I think to conclude it, if you've got the money and you've got the health and you don't mind the accommodation, just do it. You can do it. I don't know how to wrap this up, except going back to the original 30 seconds where we met this chap called Barry in New Zealand. He has become one of our friends. From Dunedin, and we would like to say hello, Barry, and thank you for giving us the inspiration to do this video.
We'd also like to say hi to the 4 young people from Sydney who did the trek with us. Yeah,
and if you actually want to see how we got on the trek, just check out our website, www.hiking with Dave and Barbara. We've made a few videos of our trip up and down Everest Base Camp. It was truly amazing. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.